Hey everyone, Christy here. Just wanted to give you a quick video recap on a couple of lessons that have been sent out to you already, and the third one that's coming out with this video. We talked a little bit about some of the areas that approval addiction kind of shows up in, and I kind of want to recap a little bit of that just to minimize confusion that you might have or questions that you might have on that. So in our first lesson, we took a little mini quiz to point out areas of approval addiction. And I know I mentioned this in the last lesson, but I just want to reiterate that just because you are checking true on some of those, or we're saying, yeah, that's me, there's nothing, no way was that meant to make anyone feel judged or to feel bad about themselves. It was more of an awareness opportunity for you to kind of see the things that trigger that approval addiction inside of you. And so the real thing about approval addiction is that it comes down to extremes. So one of the questions was, I don't necessarily like to pick where we're going to eat when it comes to, making plans for the group or something like that. Can't remember exactly how it was worded. And so if you said yes, that's you, that you typically don't want to have to make that decision or to make that choice, there's nothing wrong with that. If you are that sort of laid back, kind of easygoing, can go anywhere, just go with the flow, you tend to be a follower, not a leader in those kinds of situations. But the extreme of that is, I have to pick that place to eat and I am having heart palpitations and panic attacks, trying to make that choice because I'm so fearful that I'm going to pick something someone's not going to like, or that everyone's going to hate, or we'll have a miserable time and it's all on me. That's just one example. But if that is what you're feeling, and that was the extreme emotion in that moment, then that is a form of approval addiction. That is going to be based on the third one we're going to talk about in just a little bit. So it's really that extreme. So, again, it's okay to enjoy words of affirmation and to get pats on the back and to feel like someone appreciates what you're doing in your work, but it's a whole nother thing when the extreme kicks in, and the extreme of that is that you live for that approval and you live for that affirmation, and if you are doing that and that's who you are, it's kind of one of those things where enough's never enough, and we'll get into that in just a second, but it's the extreme of that. It's not just the normal roll with the punches and I'm going to take what I can get. It's the extreme version of that. And it really comes down to motivation. Why are you doing what you're doing? Or why are you feeling what you're feeling? Or why are you choosing what you're choosing? What is the motivation? If you're choosing things to please other people, or you're choosing things because you feel like by making choice A versus choice B, you're going to get more applause or recognition, and you want that instead of choosing B, which might really be the right choice for you, you're letting that opinion of others or that acceptance of others or the approval of others be the driving force for you. That's approval addiction, and that's where your motivation needs to be in check. And to be really honest with you, for me, I see myself in all areas a little bit, and maybe you relate to that too. Maybe there's one particular area that's really tough for you, or one particular person that's really tough for you. And so what I want to do real quickly in this video is touch on the first two lessons that I sent out when we talk about the different kinds of approval addiction, and there's way more than the three that we're covering in this mini series, but this is just to give you some things to think on. And in the full version of this program, we go into a little more detail, but to keep this into the 6 weeks time frame, I promised we're just going to touch on these three most popular ones. So the first one was needing the applause, or wanting those words of affirmation. And again, the motivation is that you do things over exaggerated or in an extreme situation in order to work for that pat on the back. And a lot of times this comes from people who have family members or parents that never gave them those words of encouragement or never gave them those pats on the back. So they're always trying to do more or do things in a bigger way so that they can get attention or get enough done so that the person that they love in their life will look at them and say, yes, that's it, awesome, awesome job. And so those people tend to be overachievers. They tend to be people who are yes people and not no people. They never say no. They filter all of their decisions through what's going to get them that applause. And for me, I sensed that, and I experienced that in my own life when I was working in my corporate job. I would kill myself in my job to climb the company ladder in hopes to be able to fill up that part of me that wanted to feel like I was doing a good job. And I wanted to fill up that part of me that someone could say, I'm proud of you. That is great. You are doing a good job. That's what I was looking for. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't that I didn't get that from my parents. My parents were super supportive of everything I did as a kid. But I wasn't getting that from my spouse at the time. I had a spouse that was really emotionally abusive and very neglectful, I guess is the best way to say that, and very distant when it came to that. And so I didn't get that from him, and all I ever got was negative that was making me feel like I never did enough, or that I didn't bring enough to the table, or all of our problems were my problems. So in my mind, I kept thinking, well, if I would do enough, whatever it would be, whether it was earn more money or get more sales or get a higher position or carry a title that had more clout, whatever that would be, I wanted it to be enough for him to be proud of me. And that didn't happen. And so unfortunately, what happens a lot with that form of approval addiction is that we can never do enough to get what we want. So even if we are able to achieve a little pat on the back and what we're working on, it's usually not enough. We get it, but it's just we wanted more. We wanted more applause, or we wanted more recognition, or we wanted more words of affirmation. And then we feel the pressure to keep doing more and more and more and keep setting the bar higher and higher in order to get more pats on the back and more affirmation and more, okay, you're doing good from those people. And so it tends to be a never-ending vicious cycle because we're always trying to do more. And then what that does is it leads us into emotional, spiritual, and even physical burnout because we just physically cannot keep up with the race that we've set out for ourselves. And then we're trying to always do more. And when we drop the ball, because eventually, you can only keep up with that for so long. When we drop the ball and either mistakes are made or we just burn out and we can't do it and we give up, whatever the reason, then we confirm in that person who is not giving us those words of affirmation, we confirm in them everything they've been saying. If they're one of those people that speaks negatively, when you drop the ball, you just totally confirmed in their heart everything that they have been saying, and they probably even vocalize that a little bit. See, I told you, you couldn't hold that job, or I told you that you weren't going to meet that goal. And then we just beat ourselves up inside about it, right? And it's this constant cycle. Or we have someone who doesn't say anything and it's silent. So when we drop the ball or we miss out on something or we don't reach our goal, it's crickets. And then the silence is almost just as harsh as the negative words that this person might say to us. So it's a vicious cycle. We run in it over and over again. And the way to break out of that is to reformulate our minds as to who we are, who are we reaching for, and what approval are we looking for. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. Okay, so the second one that we talked about, I'm sitting on the couch here, so it's kind of hard to balance this computer, but the couch is comfy, so that's where I'm doing it. Okay, anyways, so the second lesson we're talking about is failure, fear of failure. And this is the one that I have the most. Again, I had parents that were really encouraging to me, but part of the backlash to that and everyone else that I knew that had high regards for me was keeping up with their expectations and doing everything that I thought they would approve of. And I really struggled with keeping up with the Joneses kind of concept, because if I could keep up appearances and do everything that I thought they would want, then I would get their approval. And so what happens with that is I personally couldn't make decisions on my own. If someone was going to ask me, we'll take the dinner question. So, where is it that you want to go and eat? I couldn't make that choice because, number one, I didn't know how to make a decision. I didn't really know how to know what I wanted, because everything I wanted was what everybody else wanted for me. So I never really even knew what it was that Christy wanted. And my decision in that moment was, okay, who is in the car with me? Who's going to want to go here? What are they going to like to eat? I filtered everything that I did through the people that were around me, or the people that would be impacted by those choices, and I wanted to make the choices that would make them happy. When I'll give you a great example. When it came time to go to college, I wasn't really sure really what I wanted to study. My parents were really encouraging in me going to college. I was the first person in my family. I'm the oldest kid, so I was the first person to tackle college. My mom and dad didn't go to college, so it was a new thing for all of us. And I wasn't super confident on what I wanted to study or where I wanted to go. But my parents kind of worked out an arrangement for me to go to a local school, have a tour. We knew an admissions counselor there. They kind of walked us through the process of application, and she hooked me up with a scholarship opportunity. When I applied, I received it. And so that sort of made my college decision for me because it was easy, and my parents seemed to like it. And in my mind, I thought, well, if mom and dad like this, then it can't be all that bad. I'm going to do this. This is where I'm going to go to school. And then I picked my degree field, again, based on what I thought my parents wanted. And my mom even told me the degree field she thought I would be good at, and it totally was not my heart. I may have been able to be good at it, but it wasn't my heart. It wasn't my passion. And so I chose that degree field because it's what they wanted. When I chose a haircut or a style of dress or a job that I took, I tried to pick things that I knew they would want for me. Even when I chose to get married and I chose to say yes to the proposal, I thought my parents would approve of the guy and approve of the arrangement, and so I said yes. I never consulted my heart, and I thought I was consulting my heart, but the problem was, in all of those years of being so trained to think of what my parents would want for me, I no longer knew how to decide what I wanted. And as an adult, this continued going on, and so I tried to pick things that, again, my parents, my spouse, my pastor, my boss, all of those people would like and approve of. Anyone that was of influence or authority in my life was a filter that I would shift all of my decisions through first and decide, okay, will they like that decision or not? And so what happened is, eventually over time, I lived a very empty life because it wasn't mine. I wasn't living in the world that God created for me. I wasn't living in the strengths that He gave me. I wasn't operating in the talents that He put into my life. I really wasn't following that plan at all whatsoever. It really was living my life for all the people that were in my life. So I'll give you another great example. My husband at the time and I, we were going to go buy a new car. And we really needed a new car. And we went to the car lot and we test drove several cars. And we decided on a car. And I remember sitting in the car lot office doing the paperwork and panicking, like literally having cold sweats and heart palpitations, panicking because I hadn't ran this decision past my dad. And all I kept thinking was, if my dad finds out that we bought this car, he's not going to like the payment. And he's not going to like the kind of car, the make and model we got. And he's going to think we should have bought American instead of foreign. And all of that went through my mind, to the point where we drove the car home and we ended up driving the car back the next day and not getting it, which actually probably was a smart decision. But the reason we didn't get it was because I was worried about what my parents were going to think. And they lived 10 hours away from me, okay? So not only was that psychologically wrong in my mind, I was 25 or 28 years old, I bet, at that point. I was old enough to make those decisions, but at the same time, it was so emasculating, I guess, for my husband at the time to feel like he couldn't make a decision for us because I wanted to run it past my dad. So I just think, how sad for him for me to have put him through that, and for me to be that way. And so on and on, I would make those decisions about my job, my career, houses we lived in, investments we made, all of that. I would filter through those people's approval that really mattered to me, and it really built a empty shell of myself. And I remember waking up one day and thinking, I have no idea who I am. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I want. I don't know where I'm going. And I felt so unsatisfied because I was living everything that everyone else wanted. I tried to be a mom, and it didn't work. I didn't get pregnant. When I did get pregnant and I had a miscarriage, it felt like a failure because then I couldn't be a mom, and then I can't cook, and I'm not great at the whole domestic thing. I didn't want to be a stay-at-home wife or a stay-at-home mom. I mean, just all these things. I thought that's what my mom wanted for me, and I thought that's what the expectation was. And when I couldn't do that, I couldn't meet that expectation, I just beat myself up. I mean, so much for that. And so over a course of almost 20 years, that was a pattern. Actually, it was probably longer than that, but I really noticed it in that 20-year span, to the point where I had to wake up and go, okay, I'm not living my life, not just for me, but I'm not living my life for God, because I'm letting everyone else in my life make choices for me, and God is totally taking a back seat, and he is not in the priority position that he should be. And so I felt a lot of repercussions for choosing to be an approval addict in that way. So the third version of approval addiction we're going to talk about is the peacemaker addict. And the peacemaker addict is one that us as women experience a lot, and it's when we want to keep the peace among everyone we love, or people we work with, or that we spend time around, or we center ourselves around. We want everyone to be happy, and so we sacrifice what we know is right, or we sacrifice what we know we should say, or what we should do, or what we want, in order to keep everybody else happy. Now, let me adjust this a little bit here. What that doesn't mean is that you know, it's okay to pick your battles. It's okay to hold your tongue when it's not the right moment to say something you shouldn't say, or if you know your temper is going to come out before a constructive criticism, you know, that's okay. But a peacemaker is, again, you're checking the extreme of that and the motivation of that. So the peacemaker is one who is on the extreme, nervous about conflict, nervous about upsetting people, scared for what the aftermath will be if disruption happens, or if arguments happen, or if she speaks her mind and not everybody agrees with it. So a lot of times a peacemaker compromises their values, they compromise their opinions, which then can trickle down into their day-to-day actions because they're afraid of what everyone's going to think. And so this can be really accustomed to peer pressure when you're young, especially, that this continues on into adulthood. The motivation for a peacemaker is to make everyone else happy, regardless of what is really right or wrong. So to give you a modern day or an adult example at work, you know, you're working on a project, or you're working on a big goal or a plan at the office, and there's things that are not being done ethically, or you feel like that there's some underhanded, shifty business going on. And instead of standing up and saying, no, you know, I don't work like this, I don't think this is honest, then you justify in your mind, you know, how you're going to keep your mouth shut and just go along with the flow. And you're going to be a team player by choosing to not say anything. You might be listening to that going, I would never do that. But it doesn't have to be that big. It can be little things. I'm going to choose to turn my head and turn a blind eye to something going on in my home or in my relationship with my husband or with my kids, because I just want to keep the peace. And so the symptoms of that, or the negative things that come with that, is that, you know, you carry a lot of guilt around because you realize I should have said something and I didn't. And you carry a lot of blame and shame around in your heart and in your soul, because you know that, you know, what's right is what's right and what's wrong is what's wrong, but you're choosing to not say anything. Or you feel fake, or you feel like you have to put on a show in order to make everyone else happy, and you slowly diminish. You slowly slide in the background to where, you know, you're not yourself anymore. And that kind of is a recurring symptom of approval addiction, is this whole loss of identity, loss of self, not really knowing what you want because you're letting everyone else kind of dictate that for you. So I want to give you hope in this. You know, I think for us with extreme approval addiction, it is an addiction. It is something that you can learn about. It is something you can become aware of. It is a part of you that you can take note of. You can become aware of symptoms and kind of traveling down that path before you get too far down that path. All that's great. But I truly think that an addict, no matter what it is, always struggles with that form of addiction. So if you're an alcoholic and you struggle with alcohol addiction, that's always going to be a weak area for you. If you are a drug addict, drugs are going to be a weak area for you. If you're a workaholic or have eating disorders, or, the list can go on and on. That's always going to be a little area that you have to be, really careful around. And I'm not saying you can't overcome it, and I'm not saying that you can't, put that to rest and get over it. But it always is one of those things I think that you have to keep your heart and your mind open to and be aware of. Okay, I'm kind of going down a dangerous path here. I got to watch it. And you kind of have to live by a different set of rules when it comes to that area of life for you. The same is with approval addiction. I totally think that it's one of the things, at least for me, that although I know a lot about, I've become very aware of, I know how to notice the signs, I know how to call myself out on, and I have people who hold me accountable to that. But it's always going to be one of those little sticky areas for me I'm going to have to really watch. And I'll give you a perfect example. Just in the last week, I had a moment of approval addiction creep up. My sister, who I love to death, but is the polar opposite of me, she is one of these domestic divas that just puts all other moms and wives and women to shame. She's an amazing cook. She homeschools her kids. She does everything. I jokingly say she makes gluten-free gluten because she's that good, right? And so I always measured myself against her, especially as a young woman. I measured myself against her. She got married just a couple years behind me and then had kids right when I was trying to have kids. And when she started her family, I remember thinking, oh man, I'm such a failure because I can't do this. And I'm really a failure because I don't even want to do this. That wasn't even something I wanted. And I remember thinking, what is wrong with me that I don't want the same thing, Anyways, so I always had looked to her and measured myself against her because I just thought she was just all that in a bag of chips. And so I've kind of gotten over that. I realized that what she wants in life and how she's patterned herself and her life is totally what she thinks, God wants for her and is what God wants for her. And I have to choose what God wants for me, and it doesn't have to be the same thing. So this past week on Facebook, she was looking for help in creating, or preserving, I should say, these vintage wood boxes that her and her husband were given. And she wanted to kind of keep that rustic look, but how do you clean the wood and preserve the wood so that, it's good for years to come. And so I jumped on right away and offered all of these ideas of things that, I think could help with that. And having owned a boutique and kind of been a fixer-upper junkie, I think I've learned a little bit on how to, preserve that kind of an antique. And so I was offering all these ideas only to be met with her questions. And so she questioned everything that I put on there. And it wasn't questioning like, I don't know if I like your advice and I just don't like it. She really was legitimately asking questions. And so I tried not to take personal offense to that. I tried to just respond back, to her questions. And I was okay until one of her other super mom friends got on there with her suggestion. And immediately after she put her suggestion on there, my sister posted, "Oh my gosh, thank you. I knew I can count on you," or something like that. And I read that comment and I just thought, oh, I stink, I suck, I'm awful, I should have never said anything. I just beat myself all up because I started that whole concept of, I'm not good enough, she didn't like my suggestions, my feelings are hurt, to the extreme. Like, who gets upset about that sort of stuff? I did. And so I had to really call that out and go, okay, Christy, knock it off because it's stupid wood and a stupid antique. Get over it. And I really had to call myself out on that. The other thing that happened the same day is I had someone Facebook message me. I thought you just love Facebook. But I had someone Facebook message me about something completely irrelevant. It was about an event. And in the middle of the conversation, she made the comment of, "Are you mad at me?" And I just was like, no. Why would you ask me that? And the conversation just moved on, and she never said why she thought I was mad at her. She never addressed it. And immediately, as soon as the conversation was over, I started replaying everything in my mind thinking, what did I do to upset her? And it was that peacemaker part of me because I couldn't bear the thought of her being upset with me when I didn't do anything. And I so bad just wanted to rectify it if I had upset her. And I mean, it was extreme. I didn't sleep that night. It was ridiculous. And I finally had to realize that, it's on her, because I haven't done anything. And if there was something really upsetting, she should just come to me and we can talk about it. And so, those are two real examples that I had to be aware of and to call out and to fix in my mind. Now, there wasn't anything I did differently. I didn't go on Facebook and say anything, or I didn't message this other person back. It was a mindset that had to shift and a heart set that had to shift to say, no, this is not true. You're blowing this out of proportion. Get it in check and, put it into the right frame of mind. So as approval addicts, that's a real great example of some of the things that can be easy triggers for us and can create a tailspin of aftermath for us if we don't call things out, when we should. So I want to give you one other little piece of advice on this topic, and that is, maybe you saw this. If you follow me on Facebook, you may have seen me make this post about the list. And so if you've been a part of any of my coaching programs, you probably heard me talk about the list. And so here's the concept. I got this from my dad, actually, when I was a young adult, maybe middle school, I think. I remember getting really upset about something, and it was probably over a stupid boy. Anyways, but I was really upset about what someone said or someone had commented on, or I don't even know really what it was, but I was upset. And my dad was trying to teach me the importance of recognizing that, not all people are the same in your life. So there are people that have greater importance, people's opinions who are greater than others, and that there has to be a hierarchy with that. God should always be the first in our lives, and as a kid, that should be my parents, and then so on and so forth. As an adult, it's God, then my husband, and then so on and so forth. So he was trying to teach me that, and basically try to tell me that whoever this person was, where do they fall in that lineup? Probably not close to the top, or they shouldn't be close to the top, and, keep that in check. And so as he was teaching this to me, he reached into his back pants pocket, and he pulled out his hand like this, and there's nothing there, but he was illustrating. He said, this is your list. Who is on it? And he made me say, who is on my list of important people? This is your list of important people that matter to you and count and should have priority in your life. Who's on that list? And I had to sit there and go crying, God, Mom and Dad, and list the list, right? And so he said, all right, whoever that person was, whoever it was, is not on the list. So kind of get over it. Kind of suck it up, Buttercup, was his fatherly advice. And although it was kind of harsh a little bit as a middle schooler or a young kid, but that really resonated with me because ultimately we each have to create our own list. We create a list of the people who are important to us and the people who matter to us. And we should know the right order that those people fall in, and we should have a list. And that list should not be 10, 15, 20 people. It probably should be 5 or 6 people that really hold a tight spot in what matters to us and what they think matters to us. So, for me now, it is God. It is my husband. And I have a couple of, very few, like 3 women that are close spiritual mentors and friends to me. Those ladies get, that privileged sort of inner circle spot in my life, and their opinion counts. And they're the ones that get to call me out and say, Christy, I don't think this is right. Or Christy, I really think you ought to rethink this. And their approval counts, but it counts in spot 3, 4, and 5, not spot 1 and 2. Spot 1 and 2 is God and my husband. Excuse me. And so when it comes to making decisions, or it comes to wondering, is this okay? And if what I'm doing is okay, I think first I go through God and I pray about it, and I want to know He's in that number 1 spot. He's on my list. What does He think? Then secondly, if that isn't enough, and I need to keep going, I talk to my husband, and, my husband's opinion counts, and those all fall in the right order so that, I am keeping accountable. I do have those people who keep me in check, but it doesn't go to the extreme, and it doesn't go off the deep end. to where all 300 or 400 people on my Facebook page have to approve of everything I'm doing, right? That would be ridiculous. But sometimes I think we think that, like we really have that in our mindset, and we need to remember who's on the list, you know, who is there and who really is important enough and holds that precious position to get to have an approval position in our lives or have an opinion that counts in our lives. You know, we can't be all things to all people all the time, and we can't always get everyone's approval. And ultimately, you know, when we stand before God and he says, hey, you did a good job, he's not saying that to me and everyone I know. He's saying it to me. And so where do I fall in that? And so the list thing, I've taught on before. I told a lot of coaching clients about the list. We've talked about it a lot, and I still use it to this day as a mental check of, okay, wait a second, this person doesn't count. So if they make a comment on my Facebook page, or, you know, I get a weird look from them in the grocery store, or, you know, they don't jump on my bandwagon at church, well, they're not on the list. And if everyone else on the list is okay, then I'm gonna be okay with that. I'm gonna roll forward with that. I'm gonna be confident in where I stand and not run to everyone that I know to get their approval on everything that I'm doing. So with that though, when you choose to run after everybody's opinion, you get everybody's opinion, and everybody's opinion is different or slightly skewed, and it can cause a lot of confusion and a lot of chaos. And you know, we just don't need that in our life. So the list really helps keep you in check. So this last lesson, we're talking about the peacemaker. Check it out, read it, do your little questions, check in on our Facebook community. I'd love to know what you guys are learning and thinking. I get a lot of private messages from you, which is okay. I enjoy those too. But I know the group as a whole would probably benefit if you shared some of that, and you feel comfortable sharing some of that in the Facebook community. And then the last 3 weeks, for the next couple weeks, what we're going to talk about is fixing the approval addiction. Real steps and real truths to help shift the mind and change the heart so that approval addiction isn't so overwhelming and it isn't running rampant in your heart and in your mind. So we're going to talk about some real aspects on how to overcome that. So hang in there. Love you all for walking through this series with me, and I hope that you're being blessed by it. It's been good for me to revisit some of these concepts and to formulate them in a way that I can share them with you. And I'm really anxious to finish this up because I have some really exciting news to share with you towards the end of our time together. So in the meantime, be blessed, and as always, live revised.